In this video, I'm going to be talking about an upgrade I think pretty much everybody who uses a points ignition system should consider. And that's changing over to an electronic ignition system like I have a PerTronix Ignitor III in here. People are scared of points and they're scared of this conversion. They think it's going to be a big deal. If you've done a few modifications to your car, a lot of the times it seems that something that's going to be really easy turns into a big mess. Well, let's show how easy it really is. First step, we're going to have to pull the air cleaner off. Next, we're going to need to remove the distributor cap. Pretty simple. And this coil wire I'm going to pull off just because it's going to be in the way. Lift the distributor cap off, and we'll pull the rotor out of there as well. In the next step, we can just look on in here. You can see that this is the electronic ignition right here. That's all it is. It's held in by a couple of screws here and here. And the points, of course, were held in by those same types of screws. This is a dual point distributor, so I had two sets of points. But on a single points distributor, it's going to be pretty much the same deal. You're just going to pull a couple screws out, remove the points and condenser, place the Ignitor III or electronic ignition that you choose in, screw it in. It'll come with a little adjustment piece, a plastic tab or whatever to get the adjustment here on the shaft correct for spacing and spark. And run your electrical wires over here. You know, positive is red, negative is black. Negative goes to the negative portion on the coil, positive goes to the positive, and you have electronic ignition. Now, for a lot of people, it's going to be a little bit more complicated than that because your car, if you're running points, is designed to run on 6 volts. And that might seem strange because you have a 12-volt battery in a lot of cases, but point systems start on 12 volts and they run on 6 volts. And I'll show you how that works and why it works that way. First of all, if we come over here, we can see on this particular Ford, this is your ignition for during start activity, and this is the starter power. When you energize the starter, the ignition comes over here. It's a yellow wire. You can find it over here on the harness on the firewall. And that yellow wire comes over and runs ignition. That bypasses all the rest of the harness while it's starting and provides the coil 12-volt power. When the ignition is just running and you're not operating the starter, this pink resistor wire, the dreaded pink resistor wire on the stock harness, actually is designed to reduce the voltage through the system from 12, where it starts on the pink wire, to about 6 as it comes through on the coil. So it's actually running on 6 volts. That's because the points ignition can't handle 12 volts constantly. You'll burn out your points. And that's why these cars start on 12 volts so that you get a good strong spark initially to get it to start up, and then run on 6 volts. All right, so let's say that you are running points ignition and you want to stick with it. You don't want to spend a couple $100s to, change over to an electronic ignition. And there are reasons to consider doing that. That said, maybe with your points ignition you're having problems. The engine's misfiring while it's running, or it starts great and then immediately dies or sputters when you're not starting it. The main culprit that you're going to run into most of the time is the dreaded pink resistor wire over here. I demonstrated earlier. Really easy to check. Just take any multi-tester, put ground to something, and then test the hot. And you'll test that hot side with the ignition on and not in start position. And then have somebody help you and hit the start position with the ignition on as well. So start it up, or attempt to, with the coil wire disconnected, of course. And you should see 12 volts, or 12.2 to 12.5 while cranking, and maybe 6.5 to 7 while the ignition is just on. If you wind up seeing less than 6 volts with the ignition on and the battery's fully charged, the resistor wire is going to be your problem. Now, I chose the Ignitor III ignition system because of this little guy right here. This is, I got a little flake in there. This guy is the built-in rev limiter. And on the 427 here, it's set to 6,100 RPM. That cuts off the ignition and prevents the car from over revving. Really important when you have a high performance engine that you might rev up like this guy. I don't want to miss a shift and see 7,000. Even though the bottom end of this engine is built to handle 7,000 with Le Mans cranks and rods, I don't need to put it there. And what this does is, of course, as you adjust it, you screw it towards the positive, and that increases the rev limit, and negative is counterclockwise. And what you're going to get is a flashing LED here with the ignition on and you adjusting this. And it will flash slowly for thousands of RPMs and quick for hundreds of RPMs. So in my case, it would flash slowly 6 times and then immediately flash super quick just once. That means I have 6,100. Really slick design. Now, if you do go to an electronic ignition, there are a couple of other things you need to consider. First of all, like I said, the electronic ignition is designed to operate on 6 volts. Your coil is going to be designed to supply 6 volt power, and that means you're going to need to change your coil. The Flamethrower 3 is what is recommended or required, I don't know, one of the two, for the Ignitor 3 system. And also, since you may have a pink resistor wire if you're a Ford that's supplying 6 volt power, you're going to need to find another key-on ignition on 12 volt power supply to run to that 12 volt coil. Still super easy. You can do this in a matter of minutes. Since I have an aftermarket full replacement American Auto wire harness, the pink wire that I have is actually 12 volts. Now there's something else to consider about swapping to electronic ignition. Remember earlier I said over here you'd have a condenser, kind of a round cylinder looking thing. That condenser reduces radio frequency noise. And so when you remove that, the electronic ignitions are more likely to cause RF interference. Or, you know, if you call up PerTronix, they'll swear up and down they don't cause RF interference. And maybe that's true, but you're removing something that helps prevent RF interference. So you're more likely to have attack jumping or to have radio station noise, etc. from the alternator. And you can get rid of that. There's a lot of YouTube videos online that'll show you. You can put a little resistor or something here on the negative side of the coil to prevent the tack from jumping. But in all honesty, the best stuff you can do is make sure that you have a good ground on the engine to the frame, a good ground to the battery, and you're using wire loom or something to cover up wires to prevent them from touching metal, to prevent them from grounding, or having any interference from the ground of the system. For the most part, just me running through here has been more than enough to eliminate any kind of tack jumping issues for me, and I did have them initially. And I continue to look for the reason for interference on my Sirius XM satellite antenna. But again, super simple stuff like this, just isolating wires is usually all you will need to do to fix whatever noise you have, so long as you have good grounds on your engine. So I hope that has answered some of your questions or concerns about switching over to electronic ignition or sticking with the points ignition system. If you stick with points, again, really reliable. Once you get them set up and cleaned up, points replaced, and if you have a pink resistor wire, if you replace it or test it, make sure that it's good. There's nothing inherently wrong or unreliable about points. They go for years and years and years without any problems, just basic maintenance of, you know, occasionally getting in there and filing the points, which you can do with an emery cloth or super fine grit sandpaper, just to clean them up, like you would distributor cap and rotor if you see a little crusty on it. That's all that you're talking about with points. Otherwise, you're gonna have to replace them, I don't know, every year or two if you're daily driving. It depends on how many miles you're going. Vice versa, if you go with the electronic ignition system, really easy installation, peace of mind, no maintenance, and some added options. One of the course added options was really important to me on this 427 was the rev limiter. With a manual transmission and a high RPM engine like the 427, missing a shift at 6,000 RPM, you know, probably won't cause an issue for me, but it might. I'm not willing to risk blowing it up just for the sake of saving a couple $100. And like I said, I did have issues, and what actually happened with mine when I went in there is I saw that 427 produced enough vibration that it actually just loosened up a screw on one of the points. I'm sure like 100% that's what the issue was. If I just would have gone in there before, tightened down the points back in position, I doubt there would have been an issue at all. So that's my 2 cents on, you know, ignition systems and stuff. Thanks a lot.